Wonderful. Thank you so much. Good evening. It's Tuesday, October 13th, 2020. I'd like to call the Policy and Services Committee regular meeting to order. It is 7:03 p.m. If the clerk would please call the roll.
Chair Cormack.
Here.
Councilmember Philseth.
Here.
Councilmember Koo.
Here.
3 present.
Wonderful. And now we turn to oral communications, which is when members of the public are permitted to address the committee on items not on the agenda this evening. I do not yet see any attendees, but why don't we wait for a moment and see if anyone would like to join us for oral communications.
If anybody from the public would like to speak at this time or join the meeting, you can find the Zoom information at the agenda on the City Clerk website.
All right, seeing none, I think we can go ahead and close oral communications and we'll move on to our first action item. Just a brief remark as we start our action items. It's been such an extraordinary year that tonight I think what we're actually doing is playing catch up on some things that were on our agenda, hopefully earlier in the year, but we're getting to now. So does staff have a presentation for action item 1?
Yes, I believe Jasmine LeBlanc and Kristen O'Kane, Director of the Community Services Department, are here for this item.
Great, welcome Ms. LeBlanc and Ms. O'Kane, take it away.
Thank you, and I'm just gonna let Jasmine take this one as she's been the one most involved in this audit. So go ahead, Jasmine.
All right, thank you. Yes, I just have a brief oral presentation on this audit and the outstanding recommendation. In February 2017, the City Auditor's Office issued a CSD fee and cost recovery audit that took a look at all of the revenue generating programs that we have in our department to make sure that there weren't places for improvement. And they found 3 recommendations. 2 have been approved in the past and 1 was remaining outstanding. The remaining recommendation tasked us to reconfigure or improve our sort of behind the scenes accounting processes to ensure that expenses and revenues are lined up in the right spots. So we use SAP to manage our accounts, and we use what's called cost centers to essentially put different programs into their own cost center, make sure that the revenue and the expense are coming into that appropriate cost center. And this helps us to ensure that we really understand exactly what any particular program costs and what the return is if there's a revenue associated with it. So we were able to complete this recommendation by doing what we call cleanup items several times over the course of several budget cycles to really take a look at the beginning of the budget process to make sure we didn't have any errors. And the cleanups are things, for instance, finding that you had a little teeny piece of a person assigned to a cost center that they're really not doing work in, or a contract that got assigned to the wrong place, or, you know, a couple of dollars of spending that came in, you know, pretty little things. But we've done this over the last couple of budget cycles, and we've actually written internal procedures for us to continue to do this type of a look at every budget cycle. And ultimately, the City Auditor's Office felt like this was a sufficient way to address this recommendation. So really, it is kind of a continuous improvement process that we've implemented. That is essentially the, the entirety of this presentation. So I'm open to any questions if you have any.
Great. Director O'Kane, anything to add before we go to the public?
No, after this, or with this item completed, I think we can, I recommend that the audit be closed and as all of the actions and follow-up items have been completed.
Okay, great. We'll take that under consideration. Now we turn to the public. I see we still have 0 attendees, but we'll give people a moment to see if they would like to join us and discuss this action item number 1. And again, for members of the public, if you're on your phone, which you're not because you're not watching, you press *9, or if you're in the Zoom, you raise your hand. All right, seeing none, we'll return to the committee and Councilmember Filseth.
Yeah, thanks. I had a quick question, I think. I didn't realize that there were actually city services that were actually allowed legally to recover more than the cost of services. And the one in the audit report is the golf course. Are there others? Are there a lot of others?
Yeah, maybe I can help with that,
Yeah.
Director O'Kane. There are. So there's a difference between city services that are provided to the public because there's a requirement to get that service from government, and government is the
Right.
only option for receiving that service. And those are frequently limited to the cost of providing the service. Most of the rec programs are optional. There are other providers out in the world who offer golf opportunities, dance classes, recreational opportunities, room rentals, etc. And so those do not fall under the strict requirement. They're not provided to the public in a monopoly kind of way. And so they don't fall under the rules that require the cost recovery. And the city is allowed to charge different amounts. That's why we do sometimes charge non-residents a little bit more, and we are allowed to charge more than the cost of service, and we're not required to precisely track the cost of service. We can price based on the market or less if we wish.
But the criteria is if it's a service that's exclusively available from the government as opposed to one that there are lots of options.
It's a fairly complicated area, city tax and finance, but at a summary level, that is correct.
Okay. All right. Thanks very much. That makes sense.
All right, Councilmember Koo, do you have any questions for staff on this audit?
No, thank you.
Okay,
I'm
great.
very happy that you've reconciled.
Yeah, so I'll just say that it did take 11 months for this to be brought forward. So, but I think everyone understands why. We had a lot of other things going on. And thank you, Ms. LeBlanc, for giving me an example of what a cleanup alignment was. It sounded a little bit like something you should do with your car. So glad to know that it had to do with, making sure that the portions of the people and the contracts were in the right place and that we have that fixed going forward. So at this point, I will entertain motions from my colleagues.
Move the staff recommendation.
Thank you, Councilmember Koo. I will go ahead and second. Any other discussion? Would you care to speak to your motion?
No, I think we've discussed it. Thank you so much.
All right, great. Councilmember Filseth, I don't see your hand raised. So if the clerk would, actually, I get to do this one. So alphabetically, Councilmember Filseth, how do you vote?
Yes.
All right, and Councilmember Koo?
Yes.
And I am a yes, so that passes 3-0. And we have accepted it, and I think we should perhaps amend the motion. I recall Director O'Kane suggesting that we close the audit. Let me just check with staff and see, do we need to amend the motion to make sure that's clear?
Yes, that would be helpful. Thank you.
All right. Councilmember Koo, are you willing to accept a friendly amendment that we also consider this audit closed?
Absolutely. Thank you.
Great, and so am I. Any objection from Councilmember Filseth since we've already voted on it?
Nope. Sounds good.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much. Appreciate the Community Services Department sticking with that and getting it fixed.
Thank
All
you.
right, thanks. All right, that brings us to our second item, which is a discussion regarding the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, or informally known as Cedaw, as a component of citywide diversity and inclusion. Is there a brief staff presentation?
Yes, there is. Let me figure out how to do the slideshow and, oops, see that, sorry, needed to share screen first. All right, I hope that you see my screen.
That looks promising. You might want to put it in slideshow. You see the notes and things.
Yeah, I see no notes. Sorry, this is why, oh no, black them out. This is why I really should not be allowed to drive and do this at the same time. Hold on, one more try.
She's driving a car and doing this at the same time.
Yes.
That's worse than texting.
Thankfully, I'm not. I'm just trying to share screen and let's try this one. Let's see if that works.
Very close.
Very close. Resume slideshow. All right. This is probably as good as you're going to get, I'm afraid.
All right, that's fine. Are my colleagues able to see that?
Yes.
Okay, great. Please
Okay.
continue.
Great. Thank you for your patience. So tonight we're bringing forward a high-level overview of Cedaw, the Convention on Elimination of Discrimination Against Women and its ancillary activities that have happened in the city. So beginning in April 2001, the HRC discussed Cedaw as part of their regular meeting, and then it went to the discussion and items went forward to council in 2002, where council approved a resolution. Coming back in 2016, council approved a resolution that had also gone to the HRC for discussion that was titled Reaffirming Palo Alto's Commitment to a Diverse, Supportive, Inclusive, and Protective Community. Following that, work went back to the HRC and a subcommittee did surveys and some focus groups, had conversations with the community to prepare a report on gender in the community and potential gender issues for broader discussion. And in 2018, council received the report and the multi-part motion included what you currently see on your screen, which is item F. And I will actually just leave this up for a bit to give you chance to see this if you have not. There were other parts to this motion, but this related specifically to returning to policy and services and some potential areas that the work should include. And as most of you, I think all of you are aware, all of you council members have been involved since spring this year, working on various ad hocs related to race and equity and inclusion. And one of the ad hocs, of which the chair is a participant, we are focusing on citywide diversity and inclusion. And we have been, as that ad hoc has been working, we've been looking at diversity and inclusion more broadly than just race alone. And so as we have been having these discussions and thinking about what are the policy areas or the data and data analysis, data we can collect, data analysis, what are those kinds of activities that the city can do internally to look at HR practices, policy development, how we handle things like salary evaluations. How can we incorporate gender as part of that inclusionary work. So turn it back to the chair. We do have some folks available for questions if necessary. I did also want to mention that the city council received an email this evening that I forwarded to the three of you through your emails to make comments on the work that had been done regarding Cedaw. So I turn it over to you, Chair, for your committee's work.
All right, I don't see any members of the public who are in attendance, but we'll just give them a moment in case anyone would like to join us to make comments on item 2. All right, and as a reminder, if you are attending, you press *9 on your phone or raise hand in the Zoom app. All right, everyone's probably watching from home. Okay, so now I turn to my colleagues for questions. Maybe we'll do a round of questions first, since this looks like it's been a topic for approximately 19 years before we move on to motions. Do either of my colleagues have questions? Go right ahead, Councilmember Koo.
Thank you. Could we get that last slide back up, Monique, please?
Yes, I did want to mention that I received an email from Cheryl Spencer that they've been waiting on Zoom since 6:58 and the phone number is busy. So I don't know if there's a technical issue.
Well, why don't we, okay, it sounds like they can hear the question. I will reopen public comment once we get them back on here, but
Sure.
in the interim, would it be helpful, Ms. Henny, if perhaps the clerk shared, well, let's see, is the clerk working with them? Hello, Ms. Lunt.
Hi. So somebody's having trouble joining the meeting, is that the?
Yeah, I received an email that's from dated or time stamped at 7:10. And the email says, "I'm still waiting for P&S committee to start. Have been waiting on Zoom since 6:58. The phone number is busy."
Oh, okay.
And it's Cheryl Spencer wanting to address us on this particular agenda item.
Of course. Would you mind emailing me that email, and I'll try to email the person, and I'll cooperate with them in the background.
You know what, I'm going to propose we take a 5-minute recess and let staff manage this, and we'll reconvene at 7:26.
Okay.
Okay,
Got it.
so 5 minutes and we'll see you back at 7:26. Thank you. All right, we'll see if we can reconvene from our brief recess.
Yes.
And that looks promising. I see we have some attendees now. We'll just wait a moment for our other colleague. And then I think perhaps, let me see if the city attorney agrees with me. Should we just restart the agenda item, or are we confident the public was able to see the earlier part?
It's to your discretion, Madam Chair. Certainly we should take public comment.
Well,
I understand.
absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think Ms. Henny, perhaps going back over the slides quickly, slides 2 and 3 would be beneficial for those who were trying to participate and might not have been able to access it.
Sure. And that doesn't mean that I'm going to be able to do this any more gracefully. So
It'll give you a moment.
give me some practice. Yeah.
And we're still awaiting Councilmember Phil Seth, so you have a moment to get set up.
Okay, great.
And thank you to the city clerk for
I'm here.
getting that sorted out. Oh, you're here. Excellent. Okay, welcome. All right. This is a little unorthodox, but I wonder if we could ask one of our attendees if they were able to hear the presentation. Let's see. I see that Ms. Stinger's hand is up first, and she's a member of the HRC. Could the city clerk allow her to speak for a moment? I just want to see if she was able to observe what was happening.
Ms. Stinger, I've allowed you to speak. If you could unmute yourself, please.
I think I have.
Okay, perfect.
Yes, hello, Commissioner Stinger. Were you able to observe the presentation earlier, or were
I
you
was
not?
not, but I could hear most of it.
Okay. All right. Well, then let's just, in the interest of being complete, thank you so much, and we'll come back to public comment in just a moment. If Ms. Henny could just walk through those 2 slides again briefly, and then we will reopen public comment and come back to my council members.
Okay, let's see if I can do this any better. You know, I can't, and I have got to figure this out with the clerk because I have a big picture somewhere else, but here we go. So we did review the timeline of events, and the points that were made included starting in 2001 with HRC discussing Cedaw at a regular meeting. And then in October of 2002, Council approving a resolution in support of Cedaw. Moving to 2016, Council approving a resolution more overarching rather than being specific about Cedaw. It was a more encompassing resolution meeting a need specifically from a different point of time, and again with the assistance of the HRC. In 2018, and I know that the HRC had a Cedaw subcommittee that did research and provided a report as part of one of their regular meetings, and then voted to forward that to council, and then council created a multi-part motion, of which item F was related specifically to Cedaw, and these are those items, and this is what Councilmember Koo had asked me to put up on the screen again. So can you all read that and see that?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. And so now I'll turn it back to the chair and allow you to.
Great. And then I think the only other thing you'd mentioned in your earlier version of this same presentation was that the council ad hocs are working on one version of this, and specifically the one that is on diversity and inclusion. And we'll get to that in a moment. All right. Now I'm going to reopen public comment, and if the clerk would please assist with that, and each person will have 2 minutes.
So the first speaker we have here is Valerie Stinger. I'm going to allow you to speak one more time. And you'll have 2 minutes for public comment.
Thank you. I would like to clarify that I am on the HRC, but I am speaking for myself. And I am familiar with most of this history, but I was not familiar or was not on the HRC in 2001. I am always enthusiastic to have access to data collection and analysis for our work. And I'm enthusiastic about the proposal before you or the discussion before you. My only caveat is that race and gender each receive their individual attention as we proceed. The priorities need to have individual light shed on them. While the questions of gender and race may be the same as we go through the study, the answers shouldn't be aggregated prematurely. We would lose the opportunity to delve into the unique dynamics of gender and the unique dynamics of race. While we may make recommendations which apply universally across multiple segments in our citizenry, we should also develop clear pictures which show the uniqueness of gender and the uniqueness of race. Thank you.
Okay, there's one more speaker here, Cheryl Spencer. Ms. Spencer, go ahead and unmute yourself. You'll have 2 minutes to speak.
Yes. Good evening. I'm a resident of Palo Alto for the past 46 years. I'm a member of the Palo Alto branch of the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom and of the coalition called Cities for Cedaw. I've been advocating for Cedaw for the past, since 1985. Instead of waiting for another 41 years for the US government to ratify this convention, we are trying to get individual cities to ratify it. I'm very grateful that the city manager has provided you with a document, 11658, which gives the brief history of Cedaw and the city. But there was little error in there. There has been no gender analysis yet on that would be necessary, or no studies carried out yet. Such a study or analysis would be the first step in writing an ordinance based on Cedaw. And as has been noted, the Palo Alto Council asked your committee to get staff to work on how to do an ordinance. And to our knowledge, such a study has not yet started. So our coalition has many examples of existing ordinances from other cities, which we are happy to provide to staff. And I will give you the email address in a statement I will send you. I've also offered to look at the 2018 National Community Survey myself at the raw data. We're waiting to get that, and I will see if I can tease out some examples. But really, we need to write a new survey and look at agenda afresh, because it is an important aspect of life in Palo Alto besides the race, as Ms. Stinger says. So I'm hoping that you will really get going on this. Thank you very much.
Chair Cormack, I see no more speakers for this item.
All right, thank you, Ms. Stinger and Ms. Spencer. And now I will turn back. Actually, it looks like we might have another one. If the clerk would allow Ms. Young to speak.
Ms. Young, you'll have 2 minutes.
Yes. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead and start speaking.
Okay, what I have to say is very short. My name is Helen Young. I've lived in Palo Alto since 1963 and have been working on the implementation of Cedaw, the UN Convention for the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, since 1995, when I attended the NGO session of the UN Conference on Women in Beijing. Cedaw is the acronym for that UN convention, which was signed by President Carter in 1979 and sent to the US Senate for ratification. It has languished in committee ever since, in the last 41 years. I'm delighted that the Policy and Services Committee in Palo Alto has Cedaw on the agenda tonight, and I sincerely hope that the committee seriously considers how best to implement the principles of Cedaw in an ordinance as unanimously directed by the City Council 2 years ago. I am part of the same coalition that Cheryl Spencer is part of, and we have a great many resources to pass along to you so that you can see what has been done in other cities to pass an ordinance and do the gender analysis study. I have given a statement, sent a statement to the clerk, and included a website for you to look at. I have recently turned 88, and I sincerely hope to see a Cedaw ordinance passed in Palo Alto during my lifetime. Thank you.
Chair Cormack, looks like we have one more speaker, Stephen Lee. Mr. Lee, go ahead and unmute yourself. You'll have 2 minutes.
Good morning. Good afternoon, Policy and Services Committee. I want to thank you so much for finally bringing Cedaw up for discussion, and hopefully you'll be moving it forward on action. Just wanted to point out a few omissions from the staff report. Cedaw was a recommendation unanimously supported by the Human Relations Commission and unanimously referred to this committee by the City Council over 2 years ago. This is an initiative supported by a lot of people in our community, ranging from Paula Collins, Michelle Dauber, Terry Godfrey. It has the support of many women organizations in our community, including the League of Women Voters of Palo Alto, the Women's Club of Palo Alto, the Santa Clara County Democratic Party, AAUW of Palo Alto, the Enough is Enough Voter Project, the United Nations Association, and the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom Palo Alto branch. This has been an initiative that we need to take serious action on. We need to acknowledge that there continues to be gender inequality in our community here in Palo Alto, and we need to move with quicker pace to actually get serious about this issue. Milpitas explored and adopted their own Cedaw initiative all within the last 6 months during COVID. So there's really no excuse why Palo Alto should be delaying this initiative any further. So I am encouraged that this is on the agenda tonight, and I hope you move with a bit more speed to get this done for the women and residents of this community. Thank you.
Chair Cormack, the next speaker is Roberta Alkist. Ms. Alkist, if you're there, go ahead and unmute yourself.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. You've got 2 minutes.
All right, thank you. I've been part of this coalition for years. Our UNA Cedaw committee members have been working with the council to actively involve the city in efforts to address issues of exclusion, sexism, and other forms of discrimination in this city. We've been working with the Human Relations Committee and now your committee for over 2 years. We've been working for longer than 2 years to get something done, seeking support for implementing our ordinance. Other cities have done it. Furthermore, the council unanimously gave the Policy and Services Committee direction to address this request over 2 years ago. Unfortunately, this is not in the city manager's report. So far, there have been many meetings and very little action. We hope that the next steps will result in action in the time of Black Lives Matter. If you look at the history of our efforts, the full HRC voted unanimously to make a supportive recommendation to the Palo Alto Council. It wasn't just an HRC ad hoc committee, but the HRC as well. It is time to act on these committee reports. Thank you.
Chair Cormack, I see no other hands raised in the Zoom app.
All right, well, we will go ahead and conclude public comment on this item. Thanks to Ms. Young, Mr. Lee, and Ms. Alquist for joining us and for your patience with our technical difficulties earlier. All right, now we'll turn to my colleagues for, I think perhaps a round of questions is in order first. Go ahead, Councilmember Koo.
Thank you. So I was just wondering, Prop 16 that is in the November ballot, how does it repeals the 209, so it returns it back to affirmative action, but there's also there's a lot of concern in terms of women being discriminated against in that. So does the Cedaw Act, would that be a step in ensuring that there is no that there would be the women discrimination against women will be well, at least women will be protected in looking for in all ways? Can staff address that, or city attorney?
Yeah, Chair Cormack, Councilmember Coote, does it make sense for me to go ahead and take a shot at that one?
Please.
It's a broad and complicated topic. So Prop 16, let's go back to before Prop 209 was passed. We had the ability in California, but not a mandate, for government to take race or gender into account, not as the deciding factor, not in a kind of hard numerical kind of way, but as one factor in employment and in contracting. And Prop 209 banned those practices. So that required that there be no preferences given based on race or gender in local government contracting or employment. Prop 16 would return us to the prior situation where local government would have the option, but not the requirement, to take race or gender into account in employment and contracting, consistent with the background law, which there are limits on how that can be done. So it's on a similar topic as Cedaw, but maybe it approaches the problem of continuing discrimination and lack of opportunity for girls and women in a different way. Cedaw, which has been referred to in the staff report and also by commenters, is not a kind of one-size-fits-all prescription. It really is an invitation to look at limitations or barriers or disenfranchisement for girls and women in a variety of different ways. And jurisdictions have done a lot of different things under the umbrella of Cedaw. So there are lots of options for the city to take additional steps in the spirit of Cedaw. The city has endorsed Cedaw already by resolution. So the city's on record as being in favor of the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women and Girls. And then I think what is being asked is, are there additional steps and what might those be? And they can range from looking at certain types of programs or services that, say, a city or a county would be providing, and whether it is being done in a way that is fully inclusive of the needs of women and girls. That's one way that you could approach it. And my recollection, looking at the motion, is that when council looked at this issue, council recognized that there's a lot, it's very broad and there's a lot of options. And so sort of directed that some initial steps in a couple of areas would be a good way for the city to take more steps in this area. I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Molly. I think, obviously, you know, I see Cedaw as a way of ensuring some equality for women and girls, especially with Prop 16. And I appreciate your explanation that there are some differences there in where it addresses. But also, I was wondering, how involved is it to get a study going? The one that was mentioned, to analyze gender analysis study.
So probably that's probably more for Ms. Ziesenhenny to speak to that, but I think the answer is going to be that it depends on how broad what you want to study and how broad you want that study to be. You could potentially look at all city programs and services, and I would imagine that there's a fair amount of complexity to that. Or you could tailor it to areas where perhaps there was, you know, a more focused concern. Monique, did you have did I step on you there?
No, thank you. That's the classic answer, it depends. And likely, more than likely, probable that we would need to hire experts, you know, consultants with experience doing this that would be able to help us get to be sure we were asking the right questions and getting to the right answers.
Would there be any way to partner with the school district on this?
That's a good question. I hadn't considered that, but we can certainly ask.
Okay, I'll think of more questions. Thank you, Chair.
Councilmember Filseth.
Yeah, thanks very much. Yeah, so that was consistent with my recollection, sort of in looking through the previous item on council was the council was trying to sort of grapple with a couple of things, and one was, you know, depending on how you defined it, the whole initiative could be almost unbounded, and so, you know, how do we focus it to a point where I think the discussion was generally work within existing budgets and city resources and accomplish goals in a year or two or something like that. I do remember also that there were a couple of issues. One was the question of, do we feel like we got a problem here in the city, in City Hall, that we need to grapple with? That was one, and then the other one was the other problem was this issue of, you know, the United States hasn't ratified the UN Convention, and so maybe we'll have cities do it instead. But my recollection is that by endorsing the Cedaw, that we sort of dealt with the second one, and so the thing to do is focus on, you know, do we have some problems here in the city that we need to fix? What I wanted to ask, though, was I'd like to hear more about the ad hoc committee. It seems if we're going to have, it seems like, you know, we've sort of got potentially multiple initiatives in the equity area going on. So I'd like to hear more about that. Can somebody explain that?
How about I go, since since I'm the one who's on it? Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Yeah. Can I hold that one for a second and come back to that, because I think that gets to where we may end up tonight.
Okay.
I just want to start actually by saying, and I'm going to write this down so I be sure I answer your question. Big star by it. You know, this certainly has been a long time coming. I appreciate the community's patience and sticking with us. And I believe that staff has been working in the past year on some of the things that were asked of it. And the fact that it was not on the policy and services agenda last year is not a reflection on the staff. I certainly take responsibility for not being on our agenda this year until now. For me, so Councilmember Philseth was headed to where part of where I was going is I think we're actually have two components of this here. One of it is not City Hall, but us as an employer, right? And one of us is us as the city as a provider of programs and services. And one place that we could start, because we don't want it to be unbounded, frankly, is money. So certainly those of us who worked in the private sector generally feel better once a gender pay analysis is done to be sure that everyone is paid fairly. So that might be one thing we could start with the city as an employer. In terms of the city as a provider of services, a logical place to start, frankly, might be the Community Services Department in terms of figuring out of the money we're spending, how much is being spent on programs for girls and women, and how much is being spent for boys and men. I know I've used the example before of the city of Los Angeles. They started this program and there was really the whole point was to get data. So I think, you know, I know my colleagues share my concern about money, particularly this year, but understanding where we spend our money as an employer and where we spend our money as a provider might be a first step. To come back to the ad hoc. So I think the mission statement was pretty clear, and we presented it twice now about it being a professional, fair, and respectful workplace. So to me, the ad hoc that's working on diversity and inclusion, and I'm grateful for Ms. Stinger's comments earlier, and I think we can accommodate them, is really looking at like, how do we provide a great place to work for everyone, regardless of who they are or how they show up in the environment. So I think that might be that work as we move forward in terms of analysis we want to do and surveys we want to do is might be a natural home for this. Getting at how we spend our money to provide to the community. I think Councilmember Ku's question about how we might partner with the school district is an excellent one because we provide some services and the school district provides others. So those would sort of be the two directions I'm going. But the ad hoc on diversity and inclusion has really been also about behavior, our behavior, that of our staff, that of our board members and commissioners, thinking about how we provide a more inclusive space. So I don't know if that's enough of an answer for Councilmember Philseth. I know on the 26th, I think we're coming back with each of the ad hocs giving more of an update. Did you have is that enough of an answer? Good.
I think so. It sounds like there's not complete overlap. That's for sure.
Overlap with
this, yeah. We got multiple things going on. Yeah.
I think there's an umbrella. I think there's an umbrella, not an overlap. Right. And I think there'd be a way to do it that would accommodate getting the data for the different segments that we're interested in, and yet still providing the overall fair, respectful, and professional workplace. Does staff have anything they want to add about the work they did in this interim period while it was not taken up by council? I know there's a fair number of people on the thing before we move on to any motions or more questions.
I don't know. I'll ask Director O'Kane if there was anything else from CSD or HRC staff work that she wanted to highlight.
Well, so there was thank you for that, and thanks for the question and the opportunity to add to the discussion. There was quite a bit of work that was done by our Human Services Office, which is part of CSD. And we do have, Minka, I think, is observing and can chime in if we'd like her to. That work was done quite a while ago, and I will admit that I'm not the one to speak on the work that was done, but in response to the council's actions and looking at what different scenarios and options exist for the city to participate in Cedaw was one of the tasks that Minka did that analysis. So if it's the committee's desire to have Minka speak on that, we can certainly invite her to do so. We can, it's up to you on how you'd like to proceed.
I think that would be very helpful if she's willing to just pop over into a panelist and share with us what she's been working on. I think that would provide us helpful context, and I'm sure the community would appreciate hearing it.
Sure. So can she be moved from an attendee to a panelist?
It looks like it's already been done.
Oh, wonderful.
Great. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you, Ms.
Okay.
Wetherspoon.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak on Cedaw. Yeah, so in the time frame since this was first at council, I have been just doing some background work on Cedaw. I've spent some time speaking with my colleagues in different aspects and areas of the city to give them an overview of what Cedaw is, what it's not, what options there were as far as living Cedaw out as the city of Palo Alto. And from that, what I tried to do is to look at each of the aspects of the council referral and look into some options of what Palo Alto might be able to do. So I had conversations with the city of San Jose, with the county of Santa Clara, with their staff that had initiated Cedaw, and looked what other cities and counties had done and what's possible with Cedaw. As Monique mentioned earlier and Molly both alluded to, Cedaw is really a framework, and what an individual city does is really up to that city to do. It's very aspirational. So I think when the council made its initial recommendation to staff, it was very wise in letting us provide information back to them that said, you know, these are some options for year 1 and year 2. Then we can come back and we can look at something that might be more involved. So when I looked at the different aspects of the staff report, as far as the ordinance, I left that to the attorney's office to really give input on, and I provided them with some options for what other cities had done. As far as the gender analysis, I made some recommendations that Monique has kind of alluded to. So with a gender analysis, I was really looking into maybe having the option of creating like a template for a gender analysis. So then we could, as a city, say, okay, we have a template on how to do this. How can we implement it each year, or for the time frame we were going to work on Cedaw, on possibly a department? You had listed community services. That's definitely an area. So we could look at a department. We could look at a topic. Some cities that are much larger said, let's look at safety of women on our public transport systems. Let's look at safety of women in our public parking lots. So one of the options I looked at is looking at a city program or topic. Then if we wanted to do something a little bigger, it would be maybe looking at a internal or external city division. And, you know, one step even bigger than that would be looking at a department as itself. One of the big things that I wanted to do in my work, and what I wanted to caution the council and the city on, is making assumptions of what we should do for Cedaw based on possibly not a full picture of what the situation is for women and girls in the community. So some of the discussion earlier was, let's look at us as a city, as an employer, but let's look at the city, you know, as a community, what the community could do for Cedaw. So in looking what we could do as a community and the situation of women and girls, I felt like we needed more information and a baseline of what the situation for women and girls was, and was suggesting either to add questions on the condition of women and girls in the community to a needs assessment that I do in anticipation of his rep every couple years, or to possibly hear about the situation of local women and girls by maybe hosting a summit on women and girls in the community. We've done that very successfully just this past year on vaping, where we called together a lot of leaders in the community. And when I was talking with Kristen, we thought that might be something that could be easily replicated to find out, you know, the situation of local women and girls. That's some of the high level thinking I was doing. I was cognizant of, you know, that the council was really looking at a very contained budget to look at something for the first year or two. So I was just trying to have a conversation about starting small, looking, as has mentioned before, looking at a certain program, looking at a certain division, looking at a certain aspect of it. In community services, you know, how do we spend our contract dollars? Do they mostly go to one or two contractors, and most of the attendees of those programs are girls or boys? And what does that say for how we spend our money as a department? So those are just, you know, some of the high level ideas that I had tossed around and had been in initial conversation with some of my colleagues on.
Thank you so much, Ms. Vanderswijk. That's very helpful and suggests possible other avenues. Let me go back to my colleagues and see if there are more questions or comments. Councilmember Koo.
So thank you for Minka for what you said. It really helped. I was just wondering, can what Chair Carmack and what you said, Minka, can that be accomplished under EDGE? There's that program.
Right, that's the certification program. It's a company that does a gender equity certification. Is that what you're referring to, Councilmember?
Right. So if we were going to look at the policies and some of the work pay scale, if they're equal, would that be accomplished under EDGE? We would have to go through the steps in order to get the seal, right? So
right.
Would that be a small step to accomplish what?
You know, I have not looked at EDGE in over a year. The last time when I looked at it, and someone from EDGE actually contacted me when the HRC was considering this. So I spent some time a couple of years ago looking at their website, and I didn't see that any other city had used that program for their gender equity certification. So that could have changed, but at that point, it led me to believe that the way in which we do business may not be the best match to just leave, you know, just to say, okay, let's use EDGE and go forward. That may have changed. I thought at that point that, oh, this will be really great. But I don't know. Different cities do have different entities do their gender equity studies. Some set up a community committee. Some have had their city auditor do it. Some have contracted with a local university to do it. And it's different cities do it in different ways, and a lot of it has to do with the complexity of it. But I will remind you that the closest city to size to Palo Alto that has done Cedaw is Berkeley, and they're double the size of Palo Alto, and they didn't do a gender equity survey when they initiated Cedaw several years ago. It's been mostly the really big cities and counties that have had the staff and the budgets to be able to do it, or even support the consultants or the community committees that are doing it. And yeah.
Thank you. Do you know if the county has looked into this?
How the county is doing it, they're taking a first step in that they set up a Cedaw community committee, and they have identified 6 topics. So that are policies or areas that affect the lives of women and girls. And every year their Cedaw committee only meets twice. And each time they discuss one of those topics. And they have experts come in to discuss the topics. And then the committee makes recommendations back to the city. So for the first 3 years, they're just discussing those 6 topics and then reporting back to the Board of Supervisors. After that time, it's my understanding that they may look into some type of gender equity study, but at this point, it's issues such as, I think, homelessness. I'd have to go back and look at those 6 items, but I think they're only in year 2 of their 3-year commitment to Cedaw. And even at the end of that 3 years, they're going to dismantle. The plan was to dismantle the subcommittee, and that's all being led by staff in their Office of Women's Policy. And they already have a commission on the status of women. So they have that depth already to them as an organization that is scaffolding the community work on Cedaw.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
All right, Councilmember Filseth, additional questions or comments on this topic?
Yeah, I'm listening to this. So thank you very much. Actually, that was very helpful. It almost sounds to me like you could look at Cedaw again, you know, depending on what you put in it, it could be this wide and this high and this deep and so forth. It almost seems like one way to look at Cedaw is kind of an umbrella for an approach to things, but then within that umbrella, you define specific, well understood projects to tackle specific problems. And I thought your example of look at CSD and look at how we spend money and see if, you know, 70% of what we spend goes to programs that are primarily for boys and 30% for girls, or vice versa, right? That seems like a pretty concrete kind of thing that we would like to know the answer to. And so that's actually something that sounds like something that's manageable and useful, right? And bounded, right? So I wonder if we ought to consider identifying a few projects that are fairly specific and going down that and trying to tackle those, right? As opposed to, you know, some kind of, for example, omnibus study that we're going to have to figure out exactly what the limits and non-limits are of in advance. Okay, right? Stuff that we could actually do some stuff, right? As opposed to sort of having a lot of framework. Are there? Yeah. So you mentioned you mentioned a couple of things that you'd looked at that in that direction. One was you know, looking at safety, and another one was, you know, community service, how we spend community service dollars. Were there others like that? I mean, is there a list of a half a dozen or something like that that you guys looked at?
No, I just mentioned the public safety ones. Those were some that larger cities did that have a larger municipal transportation system or extensive, you know, parking garages. When I looked at it, I was really, the ones that came to mind were, you know, within my own department in community services, looking at the issue of boys and girls in our recreation program, or
Right.
just looking at individual areas of the city, saying, okay, do we want to look at like hiring, or do we want to look at a specific division regarding the city? I'm trying to look for my notes on other suggestions that I had, but those are the ones that completely came to mind. You know, yeah, I'm looking back at my notes right now. Sorry that I'm a little disjointed, but I wanted to get to the right page of my notes. But those are the ones that came to mind because I was still in the planning phase for this, you know, report. Right. I didn't get further than some of those initial ideas that I had. Okay,
let me ask another one. As you were looking at this, so sort of, you know, again, narrowing down to kind of within the city and equity issues within the city staff and so forth. A certain amount of that is supposed, I mean, a certain amount of it is the regular province of the HR department. Did you run across any areas where HR was looking at this and saying, you know, here's some stuff that we would really like to know, but we don't have the bandwidth to go find out? Is there anything that left out like that we ought to, you know, we could look at that and say, okay, here's a gap in what we know from HR that we could go try to tackle?
I would feel more comfortable if, you know, Rumi answered that question. I know that along the way, I did have conversations with HR and said, are there things that you always wanted to do, but maybe didn't have the funding that Cedaw could help jumpstart it? And she referred back to, and I don't have the certain, you know, state laws in front of me, but there have been several things in the last year or so, which I recollect from my conversation with Rumi, that addressed some of the gender issues related to hiring. And I'm not sure if Kristen or Monique or Molly have better recollection of what those are, but I know that Rumi said that some of the new state laws in regards to hiring, you know, address several of the HR related issues that we might have asked Cedaw to study, but they had received very clear, you know, direction under those state laws on how to proceed, or they spoke to areas that they were hoping to address. But I don't feel like I'm able to speak to that further.
So we would need to go ask Rumi again.
Okay. And if I could add some insight too, I know the Parks and Rec Commission are also interested in understanding if community services is providing equal opportunities for both boys and girls and, you know, men and women in our recreation programs and classes. So that is something that the Parks and Rec Commission has discussed. It may be in the Parks Master Plan. I'd have to go back and look, or it may just be ensuring that parks or that recreation programs and services are equitable for all.
I don't remember ever discussing that in the Parks and Rec Master Plan process. I mean, it may be there, but I don't remember it ever coming up in a meeting.
I think it may not be gender specific, but more, oh, it looks like Councilmember Cormack has it handy right in front of her. Of course.
Okay, we defer to Councilmember Cormack.
It may not have been gender specific, but more, you know, that there's equity in the programs and services that are provided.
I know they definitely looked at age as an equity kind of thing, but.
It's a long plan. I'm not going to be able to find the answer for you, but I do recall when I was the liaison last year on Parks and Rec, it was a topic. I don't know that the commission ever voted on it last year when I was there, but it was a topic of discussion.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Councilmember Filseth, more questions and comments on this topic?
Not at this time.
Okay, so this has been illuminating, and I think we could go maybe one. I'm envisioning 3 different directions we could go right now, so I'll throw them out here and see what my colleagues think. One direction, which I had not been contemplating earlier, is that we continue this item till next month, and that we ask staff to come back, you know, with a range of options about what the next steps are, including costs and timeframes, get a little bit more of the information that this Ms. Vanderswag was giving to us orally, so that's available to us and to the public. So that's one option. A second option would be for us to determine that this fits nicely within the diversity and exclusion work that the city manager's office is being tasked with, working with the ad hoc, and ask that it be done together. And the third option, what was the third option? Well, those are the 2 options that I think are presenting themselves to me at this moment. So why don't we see what my colleagues think about those ideas?
Do you see those as mutually exclusive?
I don't, but I think they're they're time-based, right? So before we make any referrals, I'm frankly inclined at this point to ask staff to come back, so we have a better understanding of the range of options and next steps. And you know, I think staff has heard from us about some ideas. Councilmember Filseth, what do you think?
I'm trying to bite back my urge to say, let's do a couple of concrete projects and get going. Right.
So
bite back my urge to say that. Right.
Let's try to do that together. I just think, given the conversation we had tonight and the length of time this has been around, I think and I'm not normally a fan of continuing items, right? This may be the first time ever I've suggested it. But I think it might make sense in this context. Certainly with one of the options being to, come up with a way to transition this to the overall task force that's working on this. I'm seeing nodding. Councilmember Koo, what are your thoughts at this juncture in the conversation?
Yeah, I agree that we do need to move forward on this. But I would like to, your first item one, your first suggestion of returning after more information is gathered next month. Just a question, Chair Cormack. So for the task force, is that the ad hoc?
Yes, I'm sorry, I said task force. But I think, like all of the ad hocs, we are moving towards a time frame when we and the city manager and staff together will come up with a disposition.
Right.
Frankly, it's highly likely that the diversity work will end up back in policy and services on an ongoing basis. But we sort of need to get everything back up at the council level and get it integrated, and then send it to the places that it needs to be, whether that's the city manager's office or back to policy and services. I realize that's a little awkward, but we've sort of got things on different tracks right now, and we need to get them. Sorry for the grade separation analysis. We actually need to put them on the same grade. They're separated right now. Don't know if that makes sense.
Yes.
Okay.
Makes sense to me.
All right, well then maybe I will go ahead and try a motion. I will suggest that we continue this item and ask staff to return in a month with a range of options for next steps that include costs and timeframes. And one of those options would be reconciling this work with the work of the ad hoc on diversity and inclusion. And one of the options could be specific suggestions about areas to focus in to capture a Councilmember Filseth's interest in moving ahead quickly. And one of the options would also be sort of thinking about the first format, whether that would be a summit or an audit or a committee or working with another partner, which might be a university. And I'm going to add one more thing into the motion, which is I'll suggest that staff connect with the school district and see what they might have of interest. I know they've got an awful lot on their plates right now. That's an awfully long motion. Ms. Susan-Henne, did anything to elaborate on there?
No, actually, that sounds good. I appreciate the discussion and Minka being a little bit on the spot. You did a great job of illuminating for us. So thank you for your background and your thoughtfulness on this. But it's a long motion, but it's fine. I think we can accomplish that.
Well, it'll be fine if I get a second.
Second.
Thank you so much, Councilmember Koo. I'll just speak briefly to it. I do think this has been a long time coming, and we want to do this thoughtfully. And I just think we need a little bit more time to incorporate the information we heard today and have staff bring together some formal options. Councilmember Koo, would you like to speak to your second?
Agree with everything you said. Thank you.
Councilmember Filseth, any comments?
Again, if staff could double check with Rumi and see if she's got any input on this as well, that would be, that probably be reasonable.
Just to jump in there, thank you, council member. We did check in with her. She's out this week, so we'll loop back and include some additional information. Thanks.
May I ask a question? So is this like looking for departments to have equal number of men and women working in there? What if in our hiring process, only one gender comes in more of, do we not hire and fill the positions until they're equal?
Are you asking staff that question?
Anybody? I'm just wondering, do we keep the positions vacant because we're looking for equality within a department? Or how does this work then? It's just wondering, do we keep all the positions open until we have equal?
So maybe I can help there. So certainly that's I understand the concern behind your question. There's no public entity that approaches hiring like that. I think that Cedaw is more about assessing where you are and are there additional things you can do to remove barriers or provide opportunity to ensure that you don't have inadvertent bias in your process, so that you are getting the best talent and the most qualified people out there, which knowing that qualifications are spread fairly evenly in the human population amongst all different kinds of people, then over time you would expect to see hopefully a large amount of diversity in all of our work groups. But it's a kind of more of a goal than a prescription like that.
Very good, thank you.
Okay, great, thank you. It looks like the clerk has captured the lengthy item. And I think we are recommending that the committee continue this item, not the city council.
Correct.
Yes.
Policy and Services Committee.
Yes. So we'll get that updated. And then while that's happening, I think we are ready to move to a vote. And so we will go alphabetically as the mayor usually does. And that means I'm first. I vote yes. Councilmember Filsath? Yes. Councilmember Koo?
Yes.
All right, that passes unanimously. And I want to thank the staff and the members of the public. We're not done yet, but it does feel like we might be getting started. So thanks to you all, and we'll see you back next month with another shot at it. All right, that moves us on to future meetings and agendas. Ms. Deason-Henny, any comments on what's coming our way?
Yes, so in addition to the item you've just continued, I believe the new auditor has requested to have time in November to review the audit work plan. And we will also have a discussion about legislative priorities, the recommendations to make to council for 2021, which I know many people are looking forward to. Maybe not the legislation, but the year. So those for sure will be coming up on the next agendas. And then, and perhaps in November, a quick overview of the process for priority setting at the upcoming 2021 retreat for council. Normally Policy and Services has some initial thoughts on that process.
That sounds like a very full agenda for November. I'll just state that I know that with respect to the legislative priorities, we might want to consider, in the event that there is a change in the administration, having our federal lobbyists present as well. I think for some number of years, the answer we've gotten has been that whatever it is we're concerned about might not be well received, depending on the topic. So if you could just check with Ms. Dollar and see if she thinks it'd be wise to have the federal lobbyist as well, if it's a good use of his time at this juncture. And if not, we can certainly defer that to later. Okay. Do either of my colleagues have suggestions or thoughts on additional items for our agenda?
That's pretty full.
Yeah, well, we're making up for the lost time earlier. Councilmember Philseth?
What she said.
All righty. All right, unless there's anything else, I will just check for any other blue hands. I think we are adjourned. Thank you all. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.